Greetings, saints of the Most High. Rod Thomas here. Just wanted you to know that this week's post is going to be a replay of a post that Hillary and I published last year this time, entitled How to Keep or Guard the Month of the Aviv. I found this to be a powerful teaching, and given that this weekend is the start of our biblical calendar year, or the start of the month of the Aviv, I felt it was most appropriate to put out a post that addressed this critical time of the Creator's calendar year. Originally, I had planned on doing a whole new post on this subject. However, I recalled how last year's post on this subject covered everything I planned to cover this year. So, the Spirit led me to not reinvent the wheel, so to speak, but simply use that which Father already provided. As I am reposting this installment, we are at the 29th, or I should say, the 28th day of the 13th biblical month, if you keep the observational calendar, as well as it is the 29th day of Adar 2, if you keep the Jewish calendar. So we are right upon our biblical New Year's Day, or the start of the month of the Aviv. Now, Rabbinic Judaism teaches that the head of the year, their New Year's Day, is Tishri 1. That is the first day of the 7th biblical month. That now is, you got to know that this is a rabbinic invention that defies and violates Torah. And we are not to add to nor take away from Father's Torah. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2 and chapter 12, verse 32. We here at the Messianic Torah Observer are all about what the rule of Scripture truly says about a subject. And Scripture tells us to guard, that is to keep the month of the Aviv, and that the month of the Aviv is the beginning of the biblical calendar year for us. Exodus 12, verse 2. So, for those of you who were with me last year and listened to that episode, well, I humbly encourage and invite you to re-listen to the post. And for those of you who are new to the Messianic Torah Observer, or maybe new to Yeshua-centric Torah keeping, I welcome you to this spiritually content-rich installment that I know will bless you, as well as it had blessed Hillary and I in putting it together. It is my hope, trust, and prayer that you be absolutely ready to receive the spring feast of our Heavenly Father. And the best way I know to do that is to first understand what it means to guard the month, to keep the month of the Aviv. And Abba willing, I will return next week with part 10 of our Paul and Hebrew Roots series. Until then, my friend, Rosh Hashanah, may you have a blessed New Year's celebration. Blow your shofar, celebrate with family and like-minded believers this holy time of the year. Praise Yah with your whole being, and let us prepare ourselves for the coming spring feast. Shalom, and may you be blessed by this replay of how to guard and keep the month of the Aviv. Observe, Shamar, guard the month of Aviv, and keep the Passover unto Jehovah thy Elohim. For in the month of Aviv, Jehovah thy Elohim brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. And thou shalt sacrifice the Passover unto Jehovah thy Elohim of the flock and the herd in the place which Jehovah shall choose, to cause his name to dwell there. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. This is a combined, it's not as you perceive, Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections installment, guarding the month of Aviv, how to keep and guard the month of the Aviv. Welcome and shalom. Greetings and welcome, fellow saints. I'm Rod Thomas, and I want to welcome you to this installment, this dual installment, if you will, of It's Not As You Perceive and the Messianic Torah Observer Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections. I will be posting this installment on both websites, It's Not As You Perceive and the Messianic Torah Observer, for your convenience. So we encourage you and invite you to visit both sites because they're both parts of this ministry. With me today, I am privileged and honored to have my partner in life and partner in ministry, Hillary, which you've heard me talk about quite frequently throughout my podcast. And why don't you say hello, Hillary, to the saints?
Hello, saints.
Well, yes, and Hillary tends to really post most of the time on It's Not As You Perceive, and she tackles more of the boots on the ground type of thing, whereas you know my style, I tend to get into the more esoteric points and elements of our walk. But I would encourage you to go over to It's Not As You Perceive and check out those installments. This will be installment 90 of It's Not As You Perceive, and for the Messianic Torah Observer Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections, this will be episode 110. So we're really climbing up there in terms of numbers of installments, and we want you to go back and check all of those installments out. There are lots of great content, hopefully, that will bless you as they've blessed us to produce them. So as always, we're hoping, praying, and trusting that this installment finds you, your families, and fellowships well and blessed. Well, as we are recording this installment, we find ourselves on the 28th day of the 12th biblical month, according to the observational calendar. And it is anticipated that the start of the new biblical year will begin either this coming first or second day of the week. You know, I generally don't like to say the names of the week, but just for convenience sake, tomorrow being Sunday, we may get an indication whether the new year begins, or it may be Monday. So we're waiting with bated breath to find out if the Aviv barley has been sighted in conjunction with the renewed moon. Now, if you are tuned to using the Jewish calculated calendar, we've already entered the first day, which of the first month, which is called Nisan or Nisan, and the new year has already begun. But then it hasn't, according to Judaism. But we'll get into that in this installment and discuss a little bit more about the calendar and what it means for this month. A few housekeeping things before we hit headlong into this installment. We encourage you to follow us on social media on both platforms. You can find those at the top right-hand corner or portion of both websites in that little corral that has all of the social media icons. You can contact us via email at perceptionwp@gmail.com. That's perceptionwp@gmail.com. We also encourage you on both websites, again, that hovers off to the right-hand portion of each website, the feature called SpeakPipe. You can simply press the button, follow the prompts, and you will be able to record a message that either Hillary or I can retrieve. You can use the comment boxes that precede or proceed each and every episode of both websites, and you can also telephone us at 919-374-8219. If you're so inclined and led by the Spirit, we invite you to commission this ministry as you are so led by the Spirit. And if you are new to Hebrew Roots, we encourage you to also contact us. We enjoy talking to newbies and encouraging you as you start off your new journey in this faith. What do you say, Hill, that we get started headlong in this installment that is called Guarding the Month of the Aviv? How to guard the month of the Aviv. Now, this is a very special time for us in terms of the Feast of Jehovah and the season. So, Hill, what does this time of year mean to you? You've been in this faith walk for almost 2 decades. probably very close, if not more. What does this season, what does this month mean to you personally?
Personally, this month is the time when I actually came in to the faith. So this is my anniversary month. But besides what it means to me, on a natural level, this is the month that Father said, this is the first month of my year. This is when his year begins. And this month, Aviv, is a particularly interesting month because we not only watch the skies to see the signs he has up there, but we also watch the agriculture to see what the barley is doing. So this is when Father says, watch the sky and watch the earth, and then you will see when my time begins. If we don't watch for that, then we missed it. We can't just use one, we have to use both. So this is a very important time for Father, and this is a time when we are on the cleanup stage, because we're cleaning out the cupboards, we're cleaning out the stove and the toaster ovens and the corners of the house. We're vacuuming and cleaning up. This is, someone would call it spring cleaning, but this is a spiritual type of spiritual cleaning. This is like a shadow of it. We're doing it physically, but actually we're looking at the spiritual sense and seeing, do we miss anything? And it's not just what we miss physically, it's what we miss spiritually that really matters. So this is a very important time. Father is saying, turn a new page, start a new year, let's go again.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with everything you said and more. I totally agree. And for me, this season, this month of Aviv was special for me as well, because this was the season that I totally started committing myself to this walk, this faith, and I was actually baptized during this time, over about a dozen years ago now, which, time really passes very quickly. And in that dozen or so years since then, I've had many ups and downs in trying to sort this walk out. And this is in part why you and I embarked on this ministry, to shed some light and to help others in their walk, so that they don't necessarily have to make the same mistakes and dig around and search and hunt for things that took us months, if not years, to find out. So this is a very special time for me as well. The whole concept behind guarding and keeping the month of the Aviv is actually derived from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. And it is in that passage that we find where Abba instructed us to observe. And the Hebrew word for observe is shamar, which means to guard. And in that instruction, Yehovah instructed us to guard the month of the Aviv and to keep the Passover unto Yehovah our Elohim, because it was in this month of Aviv that Yehovah our Elohim brought us forth out of Egypt by night. So what are we talking about here when we're talking about guarding the month of the Aviv? In order to guard the month of the Aviv, there are a few things that came to my mind this week as I was beginning to tackle this whole question of guarding the month of the Aviv. And this is not doctrine, this is Rod. And there are three things that came to my mind in terms of what we need to do to guard the month of the Aviv. One, we need to know what it means to guard. And what it means to guard, not from a Western Greek standpoint, but from a Hebraic perspective, since we are walking in the Hebrew roots of this faith that was brought to us, once delivered to us by Yeshua and his anointed apostles. And when we talk about guarding from a Hebraic standpoint, does it even make sense to us in the 21st century West? Number two, we need to know what the month of Aviv is and when it occurs. And I dare say that this is a calendar issue. And I know this is a hot topic, and I'm sure this may create quite a bit of controversy because we are all on different calendars, but there is a specific calendar that Torah introduces to us, and Hillary actually alluded to this in her introduction to this installment, and we're hoping to get into that in depth here in this installment. And third, we need to know what is required in the guarding of the month of the Aviv. How do we go about guarding and keeping the month of Aviv from Father's perspective, not from man's perspective, but from Father's perspective?
When we think about guarding the month of the Aviv, the word shamar tells us that we must protect it. We must, like a guard, like a professional person who guards, we must watch out. You know, we have to keep our eyes open. We have to be on the alert. And really, what are we being on the alert for? We're being on the alert because there's a strong possibility that one might become lax, that we might forget, or that we may not comply with Father's rules concerning the month of Aviv. And it is important that we comply with his rules. Amen. Because that's what obedience is all about. And when he sets up the rules, it's for a reason. He sets up how things are to be done, when things are to be done, and everything has to be specific. If we consider Yeshua, he had to come in and do everything that Father wanted him to do specifically as Father ordained it to be. So in the same way, we must be on guard to make sure that we do things Father's way.
Amen. Amen. Very well stated, and I totally agree with that for sure. So let's hit headlong into this. We want to try to keep this within a reasonable amount of time, but we have a lot of content to get through. So we're going to hit number one. Understand and know what it means to guard and observe from a Hebraic perspective. Now, in Deuteronomy, as I stated, chapter 16, verse 1, Shamar, the month of the Aviv, I Googled the definition for guard, and which is going to be our Western concept of guarding, and it means to watch over in order to protect or control. But then from the Hebrew perspective or definition, when we're talking about shamar, we're talking about to guard, to hedge about as with thorns, which is I found to be a very apt description about guarding, to hedge about as with thorns, with additional clarifications of protecting, just as Hill said, protecting, to keep, and this is the one I found very interesting, to mark. That is to really make note of, to mark, to preserve, to wait for, to watch. And I would dare say, sadly, most of us focus solely on Passover and the Seder, that one day out of the entire month. But we were instructed by Father to guard the month of Aviv, not just one day, but we're commanded to guard the month.
Another thing about guard is, do you remember at creation when Father told Adam in Genesis 2:15, when he put him in the garden, he told him to dress it and to keep it. And that word keep is the same word shamar.
I did not know that.
Yes. And that word shamar meant that he was to guard the garden. And because he didn't guard it, the serpent was able to come in. Oh. What did the serpent do when the serpent came into the garden? He planted that seed of deception that caused the fall of Adam and Eve. If Adam had guarded the garden, then, like you said, that protection, that thorns around the boundary would have protected the garden and prevented the serpent from coming in and planting that seed of deception. When that happens, then we lose our way, just like Adam and Eve did. That's the reason why Father wants us to guard the month of the Aviv.
Yes.
Because if we don't guard it, then the enemy will come in and plant seeds like we see in Rabbinic Judaism. And then we end up in a place where we no longer know when the beginning of the year is. Instead of it being the first month, it becomes the 7th month.
Indeed.
And then we lose our way completely. We're out of sync with Father. So this is important about, why it is so important to guard the month of the Aviv.
No, I'm telling you, I never looked at it from that perspective of the garden. That is a very interesting perspective to consider. And the tie-ins with this command to guard the month of the Aviv that takes us all the way back to the garden is amazing, because Father doesn't do things just out of the blue. Everything ties together. There's always a nexus somewhere in these lessons that Father puts forward to us. And if we take the time to just follow the leading of this Holy Spirit when we're reading and we're studying, we're meditating on the Word, these types of concepts and these types of links, as Hill so well brought out, actually just come out of boom. They just shine and they just pop out there. And that's why we have to understand Torah, and we have to understand the whole of Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah, that these are the Word. Our Bible is life. It is living, and it is powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. And I'm telling you, there are things we just are scraping. Those 66 books we have are enough to keep us indulged, ingrained, really focusing for a lifetime.
True.
So it is just amazing, these types of things that that just come up out of that. And speaking of Rabbinic Judaism, which you brought up, they have taken this instruction, Rabbinic Judaism, and believe me, this is not an indictment upon anybody who practices Judaism. We're just pointing out what we know from Torah. That's it. Mm-hmm. We're not belittling, we're not casting judgment, because neither you nor I or anybody has a hell to put anybody in. So we're just talking, let's just talk frankly and talk Torah. Rabbinic Judaism has taken this instruction to guard the month of the Aviv, to place a hedge around the month of the Aviv, which Judaism calls Nisan or Nisan. I've never really settled upon which one it is. Nisan. They've taken that instruction to place that hedge as authority to manipulate and control the feast contained therein. And thus they have changed, as Hill said, the instructions of Yehovah, making those instructions, those commandments, by their traditions, the introduction of their traditions and ordinances and rules, they've made Torah of no effect. So what they've done by changing, and we'll get more into this later on, by changing when the head of the year begins, they've gone ahead and completely obliterated much of what it means to guard the month of the Aviv. And I would refer you to Matthew chapter 15, verses 3 through 6, in which Yeshua railed against the Jewish establishment leadership over their taking tradition and making it the equivalent, if not usurping, Torah. Thus, we are instructed to keep the month as opposed to just one feast day, which many folks have come to do. And most commentaries, what I found in doing my research this week, and I would say on both sides of the aisle, both Christian and Judaism, fail to mention this powerful commandment. They bypass the command to guard the month, and they go straight on over to keeping just the Passover, that one single day. And in Christianity, it's not keeping Passover, but it's keeping Easter. So we've been called, though, when we took on this walk with Messiah, we've been called to do better. We are better than that. We are called to do better and to obey the instructions of Yah. So when he says guard the month, we better guard the month.
There's a very good reason why we must guard the month. You know, in any marriage, or not even marriage, just friendships, we celebrate friendships. We celebrate marriage, though, and we always look forward to something happening on our anniversary. We're going to do something for our anniversary, right? So we know that this is a special day when we made a commitment to each other, and we will not forget that day. That day every year is a special day to us.
Yes.
In the same way, Father is saying, this month is the month that I brought you out of Egypt. This is our anniversary month. So remember it. Let it be special to you. Preserve it. Don't forget it. This is when I brought you out of Egypt. This is when I brought you to myself. This is when I brought you out of captivity. If you remember what captivity was, then you will have that appreciation for being rescued, from being saved and being brought out of captivity. So this is a very important month, why it means so much to us and why it is so important to guard this month.
Indeed. So it basically comes down to us making a decision within ourselves. Are we going to keep Yah's commandments? Are we going to do what he instructs us to do? Or are we going to do what religion, what man tells us to do? Leviticus chapter 22, verse 31 reads, "Therefore shall ye keep my commandments and do them. I am Jehovah." And then Father states in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 29, and this is the Father pouring out his heart in frustration over our stiff-neckedness, our refusal to obey him. He says, "Oh, that there were such a heart in them, that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever." And then we jump all the way over to the Brit Hadashah and to John chapter 14, verse 15. And this is Master stating something so obvious. He says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." And then that same apostle, 1 John chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, he writes, "And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him." So I gave you these 4 passages of scripture to just drive home the point that we have to decide, are we going to follow the commandments and instructions of our loving Father, or are we going to follow the commandments and instructions and rules and ordinances, all this other stuff that man has created, which we call religion? And I think this comes down to the decision we have to make when we're looking at guarding the month of the Aviv. So thus we are instructed to guard the entire month of the Aviv.
Yes, when you were talking about John 2, verse 3 and verses 3 to 4, that one, it says that if you say you know him and keep not his commandments, then you're a liar and the truth is not in you. And back to guarding the Aviv, the word guard again, the liar, the original liar, was the deceiver, the serpent who entered the garden. And when the serpent entered the garden, he introduced a seed that was not the seed of truth. If you look back at the parables as Yeshua teaches them, he said the seed, when he interpreted the parables, he said the seed is the word of truth that he teaches. Right? The seed was the word. A parable went out to sow seeds. And not a parable, a sower went out to sow seeds. Right. He is a sower, and the seed he's sowing is the word. What the seed that he sows is the word of truth. Right? And but the people, or those who say that they love him and keep not his commandments, they are a liar. What is a liar? A liar does not have the truth. Right? And the thing about what we are experiencing in rabbinic Judaism is they are not teaching the truth. So the lie, the seed of lies is there, which is an opposite seed to what Yeshua teaches, the opposite word to Jehovah, to what Jehovah has in Torah. So when we look at the seed of the tares and the seed of the wheat is, what did Yeshua say when his servant said to him, well, Master, where did these come from in the parable? He said, the enemy came and sowed these seeds while we were sleeping. So something happened there, and the truth became displaced with a lie, and we had hypocrites in the body. That's where hypocrisy comes from. When you know the truth and you say, I love him, and then you turn around and you cannot keep his commandments. You know better, but you do not do better. This is the lie. So when we do not guard the truth that is in us, we guard the month of the Aviv, like Adam was supposed to guard the garden. We have to guard this way of living. It starts with the month of the Aviv. Because that is the whole salvation plan. That is where the gospel of the kingdom begins.
Amen. Amen. Indeed. So it is so important. This month of Aviv, this guarding of the month of Aviv is so important, and it's to get it right, do the best we can. So we really need to kind of drill down and prepare ourselves for this coming New Year celebration, the start of this new month. So moving on to the second point, that we need to know what the month of Aviv is and when it occurs. And again, this becomes a calendar issue. Now, again, as I said at the start, I know that this may be stepping on a few toes because we tend to, well, let's just get into it. Let's just see where this takes us, okay? So, Exodus chapter 12, verse 2 reads, "This month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you." And which month is Father referring to here? Well, it's revealed in Exodus chapter 13, verse 4. And Father says, "On this day in the month of Aviv, you are about to go forth." So, Father makes it very clear that the beginning of our calendar year, the beginning of his sacred calendar year, it's not ours, it's his, begins with the month of the Aviv. And Abba is declaring that the month of Aviv is where our new year begins. So either tomorrow night or Monday night, Father willing, and the barley is deemed to be in an Aviv state of maturation, and the renewed moon is sighted, this will be our new year. It will be our new year, and we should be celebrating because we've begun a completely new set of 12 months that Father has some great things in store for us, which we can only look forward to. Thus, Father has established with us his reckoning of time here. And he has established a calendar that we are to what? We are to shamar, to guard. And we must bear in mind that we followed when we were in Egypt. Now, bear in mind, when we're talking about chapter 12 of Exodus, we were still in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron was receiving this instruction on how to proceed during this month of Aviv. But bear in mind that we were in Egypt as a people for centuries. And when you are entrenched in a completely different culture for so many centuries, you adopt their ways. You adopt their way of thinking. You definitely will adopt their calendar. And so we were following the Egyptian calendar for centuries. And Father says, you know what? It's time. You guys are getting out of here. But here's what we're going to do. You're going to stop following the Egyptian calendar. You're going to stop following that man-made way or reckoning of time, and you're going to follow my time now. This is where things stop the way you were doing them, and we're going to be doing them my way. I like the way that one Hebrew roots teacher says, you're either going to do it my way or you're going to do it my way. And so Father is putting the plumb line here, putting down the plumb line. He's saying, you're going to do things my way. And we're going to start right now with the calendar. This is going to be the first month of the year for you. And by doing so, can you see any spiritual and life parallels here where we stop an old way of life and we begin a new way of life, and everything connected with that old way of life is supposed to go and be left behind in Egypt, and we're starting the new way of life and taking it with us as we move forward. And I say that this is part of our sanctification process. And that is the new calendar. It's not a new calendar. This was established back in the garden. But, for us now, coming out of centuries of pagan culture, now we're getting back to where we were and we should have been in the beginning. So he is now going to set us apart, and he's going to start right now with introducing the calendar. So Father in this command is telling us that this is going to be the month that not only establishes the beginning of our annual calendar, but it also will mark our freedom from captivity. And can you see the spiritual parallels here, the prophetic and spiritual parallels? As well as marking our freedom from captivity, it's going to mark the start of a brand new life for us. Again, spiritual, prophetic parallels that should just blow you away when you sit back and really reflect upon it. It's not just rote, mechanical following of a calendar process here. This is a whole new way of life. Because when you change somebody's reckoning of time, you're changing their life. And I can tell you, when we first started following this new calendar, coming into this faith, initially I guess Hill can talk for her own experience, but when I first came in, we were following the Jewish calculated calendar until we came to understand about the observational calendar. But even going into the calculated Jewish calendar, which we followed for a few years, it was interesting to see how just doing that completely spun us around and completely changed our life, because now we had to kind of work around the Gregorian calendar, which we follow every day, and make sure that we knew how and where and the feast and where they're going to fall and how that is, and kind of work around that. So it was a huge life change. So what's the deal with the month of the Aviv? Well, Aviv is a term that describes the condition, the state of maturation of the barley crop in the land of Egypt. So the term Aviv is not necessarily the name of the month, the first month, but it is referring to a condition, an agricultural condition of the barley crop, which is important, which is why it is important to guard the month of the Aviv, because there is a specific reason we need to pay attention to the maturation of the barley crop. So the month of the Aviv denotes a specific harvest season, the spring harvest. tremendous truth and importance here that we need to keep in mind. So when we're factoring in Father's reckoning of time, it's taking into account this whole concept of harvest. And hey, we're talking about some tremendous spiritual and prophetic application here as well.
The bringing of the children of Israel out of Egypt, this time of the Aviv, do you remember the many series of judgments that Father brought upon Egypt because Pharaoh would not let the children of Israel go?
Mm-hmm.
During that time, the barley was not yet Aviv, but while they were there, the barley became Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
While they were still there, the barley became Aviv. But the process started while the barley was maturing.
Ah, yes.
And it was at the point when Father said to Moses and Aaron, this will be the first day of the year for you, and tell the children of Israel, in Exodus 12,
yes,
when he said, go and tell them that what to do to prepare themselves,
yes,
to select the lamb, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, on the day when he told them this is the first day of the month, this was when the barley was mature enough for it to be reaped, right? This was the day. So I'm looking at it as Father is using the barley as a physical representation of the children of Israel down in Egypt when they can be plucked.
Ah, again, we're talking about a spiritual and
Yes.
prophetic application here,
Yes.
just like I was saying.
When they can be plucked.
Mhm.
So on that first day, he said, this is your first day. Tell them to prepare, because now we're going to bring them out.
Ah.
But Father didn't start the process until the barley was Aviv. So the children of Israel, in this sense, is representing barley. They're representing barley. And this ear of barley is not ready to be plucked until it is Aviv. When I look at this, I'm seeing the physical paralleling the spiritual
Yes.
at all times.
Yes.
And he is using this physical while he is measuring the spiritual aspect of them. Because remember, originally, when he sent Moses to go and get them, they were like, please, Moses, get out of here. You are making life hard for us because Pharaoh has come down on us so hard since you came, and life has been so much harder. But as they saw during the process of the judgments that their God had done all these things to bring Pharaoh to his knees, to bring Egypt to his knees, they finally saw who their God really was. And this is a spiritual growth that they were going through during the time, coming to the point of maturation, where he can pluck them and bring them to himself.
Amen.
That's
amazing. That is amazing. Parallels that are, again, it's just when you give yourself over to the Word and the leading of the Spirit, these are the types of things that come out. A lot of people just read the Scripture, and I'm not blowing Hillary up. I'm definitely not blowing myself up. But these are the types of things that we need to strive every day we open our Bible. You know, one of the things I've always said, before you even start reading the Word, talk to the Father. Have Him open our eyes and our hearts to receive these types of revelations. Because the Bibles we have, the Word, the Torah, the Brit Hadashah, all of this, there is layer upon layer upon layer of truths that most people who read the Bible only get that outer layer, like on the onion. They're only getting what the rote words, the words that are on the pages are saying. And we know that based upon the translation of Bible you have, you can go either accurately towards some semblance of the truth, or you can be swayed off, especially when you get into stuff like Paul's writings and things of that nature. It's easy to get kind of skewed, and definitely it's easy to get kind of off kilter when you're reading some of the Torah. That's why it's so important to really read the Bible in context, to consult excellent and good Bible resources, and to most of all, rely upon the Holy Spirit to reveal to you His truth. He's the best teacher. The Holy Spirit is the best teacher, and He will open our eyes to these types of truths that, something that Hillary just brought out. And you know what? I never really saw the barley and the then children of Israel in that particular light. So these are the types of things that are important, because when you understand that, then you start to build a foundation upon which you can keep moving forward, and your whole perspective is just opened. So indeed, that's a very good point in which Hill brought out, and it just kind of dovetails into this whole aspect of the month of the Aviv. And if you want to do a word study, I'm not going to dwell too much in it. I'm not really that big into word studies, but if you go to Strong's 0024, again 0024, you will find Aviv, or Abib, A-B-I-B, and it will give you the meaning, which is usually fresh young barley ears. And a lot of people like to do word studies. I'll tell you right now, it's hard to really get a lot of content on it, because the writers are just not interested in delving too much into it. Even a lot of the rabbinic writings and commentaries avoid talking about the month of Aviv. So you have to dig. You have to go deep, as they say. So why is the maturity of the barley in the land so important? Why is this whole concept of barley maturation important? That is a big question. Well, a lot of people could say that because Abba said so. And Abba said, hey, this is the time to go. You guys are ready to go. I'm good to go. The barley's Aviv. Let's go. Let's hit the road. But the other thing is that there is another reason why the barley needed to be Aviv. The barley needed to be Aviv so that it may be offered by the priest on Yom HaBikurim. Yom HaBikurim. How many of us have actually heard of Yom HaBikurim, which means the day of first fruits? And I would refer you to Leviticus chapter 23, verses 11 through 15. Many of us, because we focus so much on Passover and the Passover Seder, whoever talks about the day of first fruits? But there is tremendous prophetic and spiritual implications of this, and it is nothing short of amazing and spectacular. So there are a few reasons why the barley needed to be Aviv, but in particular, it needs to be Aviv at this time in preparation of the day of first fruits.
The day of first fruits was the day that Yeshua was resurrected. He was the first resurrected from the dead of all human beings. In Matthew 27, verse 52, it talks about after his resurrection, the body of many saints who slept arose and came out of the graves and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. That was the first resurrection of the first fruits.
Yes.
That was the resurrection of first fruits. Yeshua was resurrected before them, and then they arose. And this is what happens during the month of Aviv.
Yeah.
When you talk about Yom HaBikurim, we're talking about the first fruits. And I know that, over the centuries, the Levites were supposed to cut the Aviv barley and bring it as a sheaf offering, wave sheaf offering, as first fruits offering. But that is the physical part of it, right? And that was the practice, the rehearsal, the looking forward to of the first fruits. But the first fruits is actually the children, the sons of Yehovah. And this was the first set that were resurrected after Yeshua. And Yeshua took them up and presented them when he entered into the temple that is in heaven, and presented them as first fruits to the Father.
Amen.
So this is what Yom HaBikurim is all about. This is a physical thing to us, and it is, a rehearsal that we do with the barley. But remember, the barley represents people, the sons of Yehovah. And this first set of sons were resurrected, as we see here in Matthew 27:52. They were resurrected, and Yeshua took them up. They were the first fruit that the high priest had to present to the Father in the Holy of Holies when he went up with the wave sheaf offering and the first fruit. This is what that's all about.
It's so rich. I mean, this is the point of guarding a month, an entire month, because it's not just a Passover Seder. It's not just a dinner party that the month of the Aviv has turned into. And I hate to be overzealous and overreaching in this, but I have to say it almost as a trick of the devil, the enemy, to take this grand season that Father tells us to guard an entire month, which is rich in just what Hill's talking about, the first fruits. Then we're talking about the barley, and then we're going to get into the whole aspect of Passover, and then unleavened bread. There is so much packed into this month. And for us to just take this beautiful, amazing, and rich month and tally it down to just a single night where we get to have some lamb and some bitter herbs and a good bottle of wine is insane. It's sad that it has come down to this. So you're bringing up some amazing truths and parallels and spiritual issues that are important and that are embodied in this observance of the month of the Aviv. So it comes down to us knowing the state of the barley harvest in the land. And Father has given us the key to knowing when his year begins. And all we need to then do, we know it begins when the barley is Aviv in a state of maturation. And I'm not going to get into that because I don't know anything about barley, exactly what it takes for barley to be Aviv. Fortunately, we are blessed to have people on the ground in the land of Israel who are experts at determining Aviv barley. So we don't have to worry about that ourselves. Father has blessed us with this wonderful gift of having people. But that's one aspect of knowing when the year begins, because the agricultural aspect is fulfilled when the barley is mature. But then we've got the other arm, which is the celestial arm. And thus, we need to recognize when the new month begins from a celestial point of view. And Torah tells us that each new month begins with the sighting of the renewed or new moon appearing in the skies and over the land of Israel. And it is always the first sliver of the moon that begins the new month. So we have these two prongs that we need to have filled and connected in order to begin the month of the Aviv. So Father has been very gracious in telling us when it begins. So it's an amazing calendar. So thus we've got an agriculturally celestial based method for us to be in sync with Father's reckoning of time and to know when his feasts are to be kept by us. Because if we don't know when the month of Aviv begins, then all of the 7 feasts, mandated Moedim of Yehovah, are lost. They're going to be skewed. They're going to be messed up. Some people might say it really doesn't matter. Well, it matters to Father. I think Hill alluded to earlier, it's like on a date. When you're dating your spouse, and whether it's before you get married or during the time you get married, guys, you better be on time, and you better dress the part, and you better be in the right frame of mind. You're going to go out of your way to make that special, so you're going to be ready. You're going to do the best you can. So it's the same attitude that we must have when we're talking about guarding the month of the Aviv, because that is where the rest of the year lies. If we don't get it right, if we're so lax in our determination, or we just go ahead and say we're going to default to a calculated calendar.
Don't miss the date. You
could miss the date. And that ain't no good, because you're going to have somebody pretty mad at you. And you know what? Most people don't want their spouses to be mad at them, because that could go on for a couple days, if not a week or so. But to have Father angry at us and we know better, if we don't know better, that's one thing. But if we know better, we should do better. And we have the resources in hand to tell us when the month begins. So we should not be late for that date, because we've got all the things in hand, especially in the 21st century, especially when we've got communication, social media, websites, YouTube, and all of these resources that Father has blessed us. Yes, there are good parts of it and bad parts, but the good part is that we have instant access to knowing these things when they occur. So we should not be lax in our understanding, lax in our practice, lax in our obedience, because there's really no excuse. And this system of reckoning that was handed down to us by Father, it's not based upon traditions or calculations. Father set his order of the heavens and the earth to not only glorify him, but also to provide a clear understanding of when his Moedim, his set-apart days, occur. And this goes all the way back to the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, where Father said, "Let there be light in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." So Father set this all up at the very beginning. And so it's up to us to follow suit. Father establishes it, we carry it forth.
Well, this calendar is a faith-based calendar. We have to see this as we're not going to do what we think or follow what who says is right, but we're going to watch the skies and we're going to watch the earth. Because when Father says it is going to be, we know it's going to be. We just don't know if it's going to be delayed or if it's going to be early. So we have to keep watching in order to get it when it happens. Otherwise, we'll miss it if we're not watching.
Indeed. And again, like I said, we're all over. Many of us are at different stages in our walk. Some of us are still haven't even discovered the Jewish calculated calendar. And so we're kind of just going along in the Gregorian calendar, waiting for somebody to tap us on the shoulder and say, oh, do you know tomorrow is Passover? Or some of us, most of us in Hebrew roots are following the Jewish calculated calendar. So those days, and it's been running about 2 days ahead of the observational calendar of late. So the calendar, when it was designed by Hillel, back in the mid 4th century, it calculated itself out to almost 2,000 years. So, people already know well in advance, and they can prepare years in advance for these feasts. Although, we'll get into that later. But then for us who go every month waiting for the renewed moon to be sighted, it's a wonderful time in testing of our faith, which I love about this calendar, this aspect. I had one fellow who I was a friend with on Facebook who once, I had just spoken about the observational Hebrew calendar. And he was a bit upset. I could tell by the tone of his email to me. And his words were, "Why are you worried about an observational calendar when we got a perfectly good calculated calendar?" I didn't know what to say in response. I kind of knew what I wanted to say, but I knew that it would be pointless to really say anything in response other than nothing. But, some people just, they're not there. And so it's not a point of casting judgment on where people are in their walk. We're all at different places. So for him, he was comfortable with the calculated Jewish calendar. But when we're looking at it from a Torah standpoint, and as Hill said, a faith-based calendar, here, we make up our minds at some point in this walk. We have to recognize who and to whom we belong. Who are we and to whom we belong? And if we belong to Father, and we recognize that we are his children, we're disciples of Yeshua, then our actions and our behavior is governed. It's already set in stone, so we have to follow suit. And so then we have to determine, will we obey? Will we follow Torah or will we follow religion? Will we follow Yah or will we follow man? Or will we follow truth or tradition? And that's what decision we have to make, especially as we're entering into there's no better time than now to figure out what we're going to do. We need to make a decision. And we have to decide if we're going to follow Torah, religion, Yah or man, or truth or tradition. So there are 3 calendars, and I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to belabor this because we all probably know this with the exception of maybe some of the newbies. And I'm always cognizant of the newbies that are listening in. There are 3 basic calendars that people in our faith walk follow. There is the Gregorian calendar, which most of the world of the 21st century followed. It was Pope Gregory the 13th who developed the Gregorian calendar in 1582. And Pope Gregory's calendar was a refinement of the Julian calendar. And the Julian calendar is still in use, actually. It's still kind of in use, I think, in astrophysics. I may be off on this, but anyway, it's kind of irrelevant for this discussion. But the world today follows the Gregorian calendar. Then we have the rabbinic or Jewish calculated calendar, which was established by the exiled Sanhedrin in 359 of the Common Era. And it is derived from Babylonian mathematical calculations on the celestial conjunctions. And this calculator, by virtue of it being a calculated calendar, completely eliminated the criteria of barley maturation and sighting of the renewed moon. Thus, my friends saying, you got a perfectly good calendar in the Jewish calculated calendar. Why are you looking for a renewed moon? So the use of this calculated calendar is what I like to say, again, not casting judgment on folks, but it is faith in man's calculation of this calendar. It doesn't require faith. All you got to do is go online, and there's at least a half dozen free online calculated Jewish calendars that you can pull up and know exactly when the next feast is going to be. So it doesn't require any faith. But then we have the Torah-based observational calendar. Now, most Messianics adhere to the rabbinic or Jewish calculated calendar. And the rabbis changed, as Hillary alluded to, or actually spoke on at the beginning of this installment, they changed the beginning of the year, which means Rosh Hashanah, from the first day of the month of Aviv to the first day of the seventh month, which they call Tishri. And so when they did this, and you can go and do your own research, I invite you to do your own research. I'm not just pulling this out of the air. It's there. You can go on Wikipedia and actually find it very easily and very quickly. There was a focus from the sacredness of the Aviv month being the first to a commerce focus in the seventh month. You see, in the seventh month of Tishri, it is the commerce beginning of the year, and that is the focus. There is little focus on the sacredness, the moral aspect of the year, which Aviv denotes. Whereas we get into Tishri, we're really focusing on our finances. So that's sort of the change that has happened. And several changes have been made to adjust Father's feast days on this calculated calendar as well. I was shocked to find that there are one or two of the annual feasts, the mandated feasts, that have been changed from their mandated numerical monthly assignments, which Father gave in Leviticus chapter 23. They have been changed by the rabbis to make sure they don't coincide on certain days of the week, because I don't know why, but I guess they have a good reason why. But they have changed it. And again, it goes with that rabbinic understanding that they have been given the authority to make changes to Torah. Not sure where they got that perceived authority from, but that's what they believe. So Judaism reveres this calendar so much that one scholar said that the mathematical exactness of this calendar is what makes this calendar so beautiful. And then the other thing to bear in mind with the calculated Jewish calendar is that it is a calendar where every single month has been given a Babylonian name. And in this current month that we're in, it's called Adar. But then the first month is called Nisan. And then it goes on and on and on. I don't usually use those Babylonian names. Father gave only 1 month a name, which is Aviv. The rest don't have names. They have numbers. And the same with the days of the week. Only one day of the week has been given a name, and that is the Sabbath. The rest are just numbers. The rest of the week, 6 days, are just numbers. But again, we always got to tamper with Father's thing. And again, this is not meant to judge anybody. And this is not meant to be or appear anti-Semitic, which I'm sure some people will say, well, he's just anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with that. We're just looking at what Torah says. That's it.
Talking about the rabbinic calendar, the rabbis had a reason for making this calculated calendar back in
359.
359, okay. They had a reason for doing that because they were being driven out of the land, right? Mm-hmm. Rome was taking over and they were being exiled. So they had a reason for doing that, and it served its purpose during that time. But they have since been back in the land now for how many years?
This will be their 70th year.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they've been in the land now for 70 years, so they do not need that calculated calendar anymore. Why? Because they have the land where they can grow the barley and get back to Torah. But it has been so convenient and it has worked so well with them for commerce that now they've gone taken the further steps to say certain days of the week cannot be cannot be impacted. Therefore, we have to move the feast to another date or another time, or it can't be before a certain day. It's ridiculous. And why do they think they can do this and get away with it? Because they sit in the seat of Moses. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so they say, because they sit in the seat of Moses, they can get away with this. And the people who have put their confidence in them for so long are saying, well, they've been leading us this far. Yes. We will just let them continue to lead us. But remember, Father is requiring each of us to give our personal account for our walk with Him.
Indeed.
The rabbis will not be able to account for our walk with Him.
Indeed.
It's a personal walk. And so our personal obedience is coming into question here. For He is saying, you have Torah. You can read it for yourself. Yeshua said, they sit in the seat of Moses. And what do they do in the seat of Moses? They tell you what their ordinances are from the seat of Moses. Why? Because this seat is a seat of authority. But do not listen, or you can hear what they say, but only obey what Moses says to do. They say, do this and do that. But they themselves who are saying, do this and do that from the ordinances that they are making, they are not willing to obey their own ordinances, because these ordinances are nothing but extra weight, a burden for you to carry. So in Matthew 23, verses 2 and 3, Yeshua says, the scribes and Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses. All therefore whatsoever, and the King James says, they bid you observe. But that's not correct. That's an error, because that verse right there has been shown to be in contradiction to what Yeshua has been teaching all along, because He has told us that they are hypocrites. They are all these things that He described them. And in this very verse, He's saying, do not do what they say, but do what Moses says. For they themselves do not do what they say.
Indeed.
So when we read that verse in Matthew 23, verses 2 and 3, when we come to verse 3, we have to correct the word they and put he, and that he would represent Moses. So it should read in verse 3, all therefore whatsoever he, speaking of Moses, bid you observe, that you must observe and do.
Yes.
But do not ye after their works, meaning the scribes and Pharisees, for they say and do not do it. So this English translation for that particular verse in Matthew 23 verses 2 to 3, when you read it and you really pay attention to it on the surface using the English translation without correction, it is saying, listen to whatever the scribes and Pharisees says. Do whatever they want you to do or whatever they tell you to do. Okay? But that's really not what the original Hebrew said in the original Hebrew Matthew, because Matthew was originally written in the language of Hebrews, not Greek. And so when we go back to the Hebrew, we see that that's a mistake in the translation. So Yeshua is saying here, because Yeshua will not contradict himself. He can't say he doesn't agree with them. He doesn't do what they want him to do, but we must do it. That would be total craziness. So because we know Yeshua doesn't do that, we had to go back to research to find out, what is this really saying? What is Yeshua saying? Is he contradicting himself? No, he's not contradicting himself. It was the translators who put the wrong pronoun in the wrong place. And so verse 3 says, therefore, whatever Moses bids you to do, that you obey. So back to what I was saying. Now that we have Torah and we realize that we cannot have the rabbis answer to Jehovah for us, we must be ready to answer for ourselves. And to answer for ourselves, we must go read Torah for ourselves. What Torah says is what Moses taught. And any place that Yeshua made a correction, then we go with that correction, because he says, one greater than Moses is here, speaking of himself. And when Yeshua speaks, we take his word over anything else. So the fact that we know that the scribes and Pharisees, which are the rabbis, are sitting in the seat of Moses, that seat of authority, taking authority, but providing wrong information. That is leaven in itself. And Yeshua said, be careful of the teachings of the scribes and Pharisees, because that's leaven.
Leaven, yes.
Right? So when they come to us with these changes in the calendar and the reasons why the changes are, these are for their convenience. This is not according to what Jehovah gave Moses to give to us regarding the calendar. And so we have to be careful that we pay attention to what Torah says, not what the rabbi says. Because in the end, we are accountable for what we obey. And to whom you obey, is that person to whom you become a servant.
Yes, indeed.
So we are not servants of rabbis. We are servants of Yeshua.
Indeed.
Okay, we answer to Yeshua, the Son of the living God, Yehovah, who made the law and gave it to Moses to give to us. And so with that in mind, we have to walk circumspectly. We walk by faith, not by sight, not by convenience. They had 70 years to fix this thing that they had to do. And I give them that. It kept them together for that time. But they've had 70 years to get back on track. And they haven't taken the opportunity to do that because they have become a law unto themselves.
Well, one of the good news that we were kind of hearing through the grapevine is that there is a grassroots effort to really bring the current, there actually is, the Sanhedrin has been reconvened in the land of Israel. I think they started back in 2016 and maybe off on that. I'm not entirely sure. But it seems that there is a very, very, very grassroots effort to actually start going back to the Torah observational calendar. Granted, it's very low It's very grassroots, but there is a movement. And we all know that there is coming a time when the scales will drop from the eyes of our Jewish cousins, and they will come around. And as Paul says, all Israel will be saved. So we're hoping and looking forward to that day when we're all coming onto the same page and we come together and recognize Yeshua as our Messiah, and we're following Torah the way Yeshua modeled for us and taught us to follow. So that's thank you very much for that, Hillary, because that is very key information to keep in mind when we're talking about this calendar. Now, moving on to the Gregorian calendar, of course, the Gregorian calendar we know factors in Catholic and pagan-based, what I call horror days, and is, of course, based on, the rabbinic calendar, mathematical calculations. So there is no concern whatsoever for the Creator's reckoning of time factored into the Gregorian calendar whatsoever. And when is the new year? Well, we all know it begins on January 1st, and of course it is filled with debauchery. So it is a paganistic, debauchery-filled holiday that people all over the world celebrate. And we all know of the famous New Year, rockin' New Year's Eve festivals and things in New York and Times Square with the ball dropping, and then fireworks all across, and they're tracking, because I think New Year starts in Australia first, and blah, 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 blah. And it's a big deal. But it is far, far, far removed from Father's reckoning of time. Man is having his heyday, but there's coming a time in the world tomorrow when Master will come down. He'll crack the sky, come down, and I believe on that day, he is going to consume and destroy all of the calendar. He's going to set it back to the way it's supposed to be anyway. So it's coming a time when the Gregorian calendar is going to go bye-bye. And Father's reckoning of time will be reinstalled as the time in which we will follow. So as Torah observant believers in Yeshua, then, we must pick a calendar. So we got the Gregorian calendar, which will not sync us with Father's reckoning of time. That's a given. We have the calculated Jewish calendar that puts us under the control of man's reckoning of time based upon what? Religion and tradition. And most of us came out of one religion, and when we start adopting Judaism as the standard by which we live and walk out our faith, all we've done is exchanged one religion for another. So it's almost like that old adage, from the pot or the frying pan to the fire. That's exactly what we're doing. So we really have to step back and take a look at what we're doing. The observational calendar, on the other hand, puts us in sync with Father's reckoning of time. And it's because, why? It's faith and Torah based. How important is it to us, to each of us, to be in sync with Father and to be on time for his set apart days? That's what we have to ask. Is it important to us? Because it may not be important to you, as it may be to me or to Hillary. We're all, again, at different stages of our walk with Messiah. And for some of the newbies, they're coming in when their eyes are wide open, and they don't know. I remember when Hillary and I had we just adopted some brand new friends in the Hebrew roots faith. And Hillary and I, I'll never forget this. Hillary and I had just come from a feast conference. I don't recall which feast conference it was, but we came from the feast conference. We're at the airport waiting for one of our kids to pick us up at the airport, and Hillary receives a call from one of our friends, and they were just recently transitioned into the faith. And Hillary was talking to our friend, and the friend didn't know that the feast day had come and gone. We had just gone to the celebration and had come back, and she's talking to the friend, and she goes, it was a Tabernacles, and it was like, what? because they're brand new, they didn't understand the calendar situation. They completely missed an entire week's celebration of a feast. And they're not the only one. I don't mean to make light of this situation, but they are emblematic of so many newbies who come in who don't know. And it's this calendar thing that's messing everybody up. So we have to make a decision on which calendar we're going to follow. And if we're going to follow it, then do the best you can. The next item that we need to, and this is the third part of this, is to know and understand what is required in terms of guarding the month of the Aviv. And this is the crux of this episode as we start to wind down in the last part of this installment. And so the question is, how do we guard and how do we keep the month of the Aviv as commanded by Father in his Torah? All we need in terms of knowing how to guard the month of the Aviv is found in Exodus chapter 12 and 13. And I would encourage you this week, as you're entering into the new year, to actually pull these passages up and read them again and get a firm understanding. It may even help you to take out a tablet and outline exactly verbatim what Father is saying. You may need 2 or 3 translations as well. But Exodus chapter 12 and 13, Leviticus 23, which is the standard, it's the go-to passage, the go-to chapter in Torah for the feast days. And then, of course, what this installment was initially starting out on is Deuteronomy chapter 16. So we must keep in mind, though, that we're talking about keeping a season. It comes back again, a season, a month, as opposed to just a single night, a lamb dinner party. It's more than that. It's an entire season. It's a month. And I believe that Father knew we would reduce the significance of this command to guard the month of the Aviv. I think he knew that it was going to be reduced to just a single Passover Seder meal. But we go back to his word, as Hillary has said several times today, going back and reading Torah, he makes it very clear. We're not just guarding Passover Seder and dinner, we're guarding the month of the Aviv.
In 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7 to 8, it talks about, purge out therefore the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are unleavened. And so when we purge out the old leaven that we may become a new lump, what is the old leaven that we're purging out? We know that we're doing the physical cleaning of the house and the car and the couch and everything else. But not just that. Let's look at the spiritual side. This physical exercise is to get us to look at the spiritual part of us. And this leaven that we need to purge out of us spiritually is wrong information. Yeshua taught us truth, the word of truth. And when we have Torah, which that's all Yeshua preached, taught when he was here. People don't seem to realize that the New Testament, Yeshua is teaching Torah. Paul is teaching Torah. James, Jude is teaching Torah. When we look at the Torah that is being taught, and then we see the practice of keeping Torah, because the apostles did, Yeshua did, everybody did.
So they kept the feast.
Mm-hmm. And even after Yeshua was resurrected, and after the day of Pentecost, and after Paul was converted, they continued to keep the feasts. So they continued to keep Torah. And when we see all of this happening, and then we now are coming into Hebrew roots, we want to keep Torah. We don't want to keep Torah look-alike. We don't want to keep a semblance of Torah, a veneer of Torah.
Like Torah reduced sugar, reduced caffeine, reduced or foods
decaffeinated Torah. We don't want to do Torah veneer. We want to do the actual Torah. And when we do, we will see the leaven that is in us, because we will see, how are we doing it? Are we doing it Father's way, which is the original true way, or are we doing it the convenience way, the commercial way, which is the veneer of it? So when we think about this, and we have to purge out that leaven out of us, out of our system, we have to start with the calendar. At least get it on time. And if you show up, then Father will help you to get the rest of it straight. But first, we've got to get the calendar right. So let us not just go ahead and say, okay, this is Passover. Yeah, this is unleavened bread. Yeah, we are 2 days off. They're 3 days off. We're 1 day off. We're whatever. No, let's get on time. Would you like to show up to your date 2 days late? Do you think that person want to see you again? Please, don't even call me. You didn't show up. Okay, so let's take this thing seriously. This is not just a religion, and we're not following the commandments of men and the traditions of men anymore. We got enough of that into Christianity, and we got out of it. Like you said, jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. Let's not do any more of that. Let's get serious now. It's time to really grow up and make a commitment. Children don't make commitments, but adults do.
Yes, indeed.
And we are held accountable for the commitments that we make. We are responsible citizens of the kingdom. So let's start, behaving that way.
Indeed, indeed. So the whole month, the whole guarding of the month of Aviv is not, as I've said multiple times in this installment, more than a Seder dinner. It involves Passover Day. It involves the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a 7-day feast that we're instructed to not eat leavened products. And then coupled in that week, we've got Yom HaBikurim, or the Day of First Fruits. This is all nestled into this month of Aviv. So the sacrifice of the Passover lamb, which is something we need to keep cognizant of. That seems to be the hallmark, which it is. It is the pearl. It is the gem of the celebration for the month of the Aviv. And Passover has become, Passover encompasses the whole 8 days, Passover day and 7 days of unleavened bread, with Yom HaBikurim sandwiched in between there. So we've got these 8 days that has been summarized as Passover. So when we're talking about Passover, it's just not the Passover day, but it is the whole period of time, the whole season for the most part, just in terms of a title. When we're looking at guarding the month of the Aviv and what is required is the Passover lamb. And if we go back to Exodus chapter 12 and Exodus chapter 13, where Father describes how we're supposed to sacrifice the Passover lamb. And then when we were in Egypt, we were applying the blood of the lamb to our doorpost and the lintels of our homes. And then as we moved into the land, we would go up to the temple area, the tent of meeting, and have the rabbis, or I should say the rabbis, forgive me, have the priest. The rabbis hadn't come along yet. That was Talmudic time. But have the priest sacrifice the lamb, and then we would take it home and roast it, and then we would have our Seder. But that is not required anymore, because Yeshua took care of that for us. Yeshua is our Passover lamb. He did it all for us. So we have several people in Hebrew roots now that have declared that they go ahead and they actually sacrifice a lamb on Passover. That's not required. And even if we were, even if Yeshua hadn't come and hadn't paid the ultimate price for us, it still wouldn't be Torah-based to sacrifice your own, because Father made it very clear you're not to sacrifice this Passover lamb within your gates.
Right.
You are supposed to take that lamb or purchase a lamb when you got up to the pilgrimage site, and then the priest at the temple would do the sacrificing, and then we would go ahead and take a portion of that lamb and then have our meal. So, but that's all done away with. That's in the past. And again, that is prophetic and spiritual implications that we could spend an entire episode alone on. It's just tremendous, but I don't want to belabor that fact. So we keep the Passover meal, which is another aspect. And under the renewed covenant, or the new covenant, which Master instituted, we want to observe the bread and wine and foot washing ceremony as outlined in Matthew chapter 14, John chapter 13, and 1 Corinthians chapter 11. I know a lot of you are probably rolling your eyes. Foot washing? Yes. Master instructed us. He says, do this as I have done to you. So Master said, hey, I want you, he says, as often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me. So the bread and the wine and the foot washing are institutions that Master added to Passover. So we are obliged to do that. And then we are to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. And in doing so, as Hillary said, we are to rid our homes and our dwellings of all leaven. This is Torah. This is non-negotiable. This is something that we have to do. We are to celebrate Yom HaBikurim, which is the day of first fruits. Again, how often have you heard anybody even talking about that? And this date, we can't really celebrate like Torah has instructed us to. We are not agricultural in our occupations, and we do not live in an agricultural society like we used to. So it's not a thing of bringing the omer to the priest and having them wave it before Yehovah anymore. But we can take this opportunity in a symbolic way and to offer our sacrifices, the first fruits of our increase, unto the work of the gospel. We have the opportunity to do that, and we should take that opportunity to bless the ministries that bless us with their teachings, and not just blessing them with finances, which is a big deal to do, but also bless them with our talents and our labor and our efforts as well. And prayers, absolutely, and talents. And then this is the thing that impacts me, because Hillary was so instrumental with our children. Teach our children the significance of the season. Exodus chapter 12, verse 26 instructs us in Torah that we are to teach the children the significance and meaning of this season. I can guarantee you, dollars to a donut, that many of us, I shouldn't say most, that's judging, but many of us fail to even give this a thought. What have we been trained to do in Christianity? We go to church and we send our kids off to let somebody else teach them. And then we pick them up at the end of service and go home, and then we go on with the rest of our secular lives, and then we repeat this cycle the next week. How many of us take the time to teach our children Torah, to teach them what Yeshua taught us? This is vital. That responsibility cannot be shoved off to somebody else. It's our responsibility to do that. And we are to proclaim and convene a holy convocation and observe a day of rest on the first and seventh day of unleavened bread. Again, how many of us in our faith community actually observe this? 7 days we are to eat unleavened bread, and then the first and seventh day of that period, we are to convene a holy convocation. What does that mean? We do not work, and we convocate. We find fellowship. If it's just you and your wife, and that's the best you can do, then you need to convocate. You need to come together. There are online opportunities in which you can go and convocate as well. So these are opportunities that we must seek out. That's why we have time right now to get this all set up. There's no excuse. Too many of us wait to the last minute and then the day comes and then we don't know what to do. It takes preparation for this. We have to have, as Hillary said, we got to take this serious. Father takes it serious. And when you're going on a date, as she used as an analogy, you prepare, you plan, you invest, you put yourself into it so that when the day comes, it's a pleasure. You enjoy it. And that's what we need to keep in mind. And we are to redeem our firstborn children and dedicate them to Jehovah, as in Exodus chapter 12, verses 2 through 13. How many of us actually do that? Again, we can't do it exactly as Torah stipulates in chapter 12 of Exodus. But what we can do is that we can dedicate our children. We should do that not just on Aviv. We should be praying for our children every day. And we should be dedicating our children. And I would go as far as to say not just our firstborn sons, but our daughters as well. All of our children should be dedicated to Father and given over to them. It should start from the time they're born until the time they leave home. And then we should celebrate the new moon as the beginning of the month, which we're anxiously waiting for to happen either tomorrow night or Monday night.
Proverbs 22:6 tells us to train up the child in the way he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. So if we start now, then we don't have to wait for later for the teenage tantrums to go on. And we have to be worrying about where they are and what are they doing. Because, you know, Rod, we have been so blessed. Three children, and we have not had one teenage mishap, tantrum, or misbehavior. And not even terrible twos. We didn't even have terrible twos. So that's what happened when you train up your child and the way he should go. Father intervenes on your behalf and remind your children of how to behave. And they remember, and wherever they are out in the world, they have that standard that they hold themselves to because they know what is right and what is wrong. And when you trained, we didn't have the feast days when our children were young, but when I came in and they were teenagers, I got them in right away. And they were happy to help with the research and to help with the study because this was exciting to them. We're making a change. Well, at first it was, are you serious, Mommy? You taught us blah, and now you're saying something else? Are you serious? I said, I'm sorry, but, you know, if I had known better, I would have done better. I taught you everything I knew in the Bible. And this is all that I knew. And now that I know more, I'm bringing that to you now. So let's dig in together and find out more about this.
Well, can expand on that a little bit, because this is probably one of the biggest challenges that new members to our faith, people who are making that transition, face when they come into our faith, and they're having to deal with family under their roof that they live in, and they're having to do with family outside, and then of course friends and co-workers. How would you coach, how would you advise a new person coming into Torah as to how they should introduce, how they should, how do I want to say that? How should they put forth this new faith to their families and deal with the backlash and the confusion and the frustration and the curiosity and all the mess that comes with introducing a new life. How would you advise a new person coming into Torah?
Well, everybody coming in is at a different stage in your life. You may come in as a mother, like in my sense, okay, and a wife. So when you come in like this, the only backlash that you would expect, or you probably expect zero backlash, and then you're faced with the backlash. But when you share the news of your newfound information concerning your faith, you may get some skepticism, and you may get some, are you crazy? And you may get some, tell me more, right? Just depends on who you're living with and the relationship you've had with that person all along. If you've had a close relationship, then you have the opportunity to share, but not everybody's going to take it the way you took it. So be prepared for rejection, but at the same time, have faith that Father will open their eyes. Remember, you cannot open anybody's eyes. You cannot change anybody's thoughts. So if the person says, that's for you, that's not for me, then accept it and move on. Your job is to make your life show the difference, because what you have just received needs to make a difference in you, and the people around you are watching to see what difference is it making. Is it making you a better person? Is it making you a kinder person? What is it supposed to do for you that you want it to do for me? And when these questions are going around in their head, you don't know those questions. So your job is to get on your knees, get in your Bible, and focus, because you are carving a path in your family to show the light. That's really what you're doing. What does Father require of you? You cannot do more than Father requires of you. He doesn't require you to save anybody. He doesn't require you to change anybody's mind. And there are things that you just cannot do. But the things you can do are, one, show the light. Because you have just received truth. Thy word is truth. Thy word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my path. And it needs to show that you received something good and it is making a difference in you. If it's making zero difference in you, then you've just voided all of this thing that you talked about. If it's making zero difference. If you're not more patient, if you're not growing in patience, you're not growing in love, you're not growing in kindness, you're not growing in humility, you're not growing in meekness, you're not growing in grace, the fruit of the Spirit needs to come out in you. If you're a child and you have come in and you just got this, you ought to be growing in obedience. Because if you are going by Torah, Torah tells you to be obedient to your parents. So you're not going to be the rebellious person. You're going to be teachable. You're going to be honoring your parents. You're going to be showing that you're actually reading Torah and you're actually seeking to obey Torah, and it is making a difference. Then your parents are going to say, oh my God, whatever he's got or whatever she's got, keep it going. Let's encourage him to do it.
So setting an example.
Yes, setting the example for your younger sisters and brothers, and even for your parents, just to show that what you have received is worth it. It is valuable. It is light, and it can make a change. If it can make a change in the rebellious me, it can definitely make a change in you. And remember, you're walking by faith. If you're a husband and you're coming into this and your wife is refusing to be part of it, then you're going to be very gentle, be very caring, and with more love. Because what did Yeshua say? By your love we shall know that you are my disciples. So you're saying that I am a disciple of Yeshua. But if somebody's coming to you to pick a fight all the time because they want you to blow up, or they're testing you, or they're just trying to beat you down, or whatever their ulterior motives are. And you find that every time this person comes to talk to me, it's going to be a fight. Then you're just going to have to back off and come up with some reason. I'm sorry, I cannot answer your question. I am new in this faith. I am studying for myself. I need to find the rest of the answers. And as soon as I do, I will let you know. Can we have this discussion at another time? Can we do this later? And if you can do that, but depending on where you are in your life and which station you are in the family, your actions will be a little bit different to whoever you're dealing with, and especially to if the people around you are civil or are they hostile or are they just critical. But at the same time, your job is to show the light. You are now a representative of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. So let's just get on your knees. The more you pray and the more you read the word, the more you'll stay out of trouble and the more you will learn. That's what I say. People do have questions. They can always type it into the blog, into the comment section.
Or email.
Yeah, and we can know what people are facing, what their struggles are, and we can help them through those times, with just a little bit of word of wisdom. It's always important to have somebody you can talk to.
Right.
Because by yourself, you'll drive yourself crazy, because you will become sometimes depressed because your family's not talking to you, or because depending on what kind of family dynamics you have, it can become very hard. But if you have a supportive family who wants to see the best for you, at the same time, you can still have a supportive family who wants to see the best for you, but is very controlling and say, you've got to do it my way, or get out of my house. Those things do happen too. So let us know what your struggles are so that we can help you through it, and you'll have someone you can talk to. Because it's always important to have someone you can share with and who can help you and give you some wisdom, help you in that sense.
Yeah, and so many people find themselves feeling that they're alone, but there are resources like this ministry here that are here to help. And so that's talking to you guys. It's talking to you. If you find yourself in that, don't be hesitant in the least to reach out and use the various methods of reaching us if you need help. That's what we're here for. We're here to provide you assistance. This is a ministry. So we're here to help and to augment and to assist, because once you get armed with this and you get past this phase in your life, then you turn around and you do it for somebody else. You pay it forward. That's just the way things are. We all went through this. And so now we're paying it forward through this ministry. So we're coming now down to close to 2 hours on this, and it was a big topic, and we could literally go another hour or two, but we're not. We're going to kind of bring these things down to a close. And so in looking at guarding the month of the Aviv, we need to prepare ourselves to keep the month. And in that preparation, we need to have a spirit, a zealousness about us that we're looking forward to keeping it. It's not just going through the motions, as Hillary said, of a yet another day. I remember when we were going through UCG, United Church of God, and some of the churches of God. These folks have been in celebrating the feast for decades, and it's just another feast. They're going through it again. How many of this is your fourth or fifth or a 40th time doing? You get the people who raise their hands and they just look like they're just worn out. We have to have a zealousness and a zeal about us for the feast. This is exciting times. These are times we need to look for. I look forward to the feast. I really do. And we all should be looking forward to it. Father looks forward to it. Then we should also be looking forward to it. We should have a non-compromising sense in our commitment and practices. We should be teachable. We should be, as Hillary said, obedient. We have to look at logistics. What do we need to do to get our lives and our homes ready for the month of the Aviv? There's a period of time where we got to get rid of the leaven. Are you going to wait to the day of to get rid of it? Or why don't you start looking at getting rid of the leaven before, in the midst of leading up to the month of the Aviv? Hillary makes sure that when we do our shopping from this, I don't think we bought any kind of baked products, and we're not going to buy any baked products or any leavened products now until after the feast are over, because we don't want to get to the point where we've got bags of leavened products that we don't know what to do with. So you want to prepare, you want to have logistics in place and in order to receive the month of the Aviv. Finances, we should be preparing for it. We need to make sure that we have our finances in order so that we can participate in it. And then we need to set aside time to observe. Remember, there are at least 2 days. I haven't looked at the calendar very closely, but there are at least 2 days that we need to be off. We need to be home. And if you're working, then you need to have the time off. So we need to prepare for that. So set aside time. And then, of course, study. Read the Word, read Torah, study. And then on top of that, pray. Prayer is essential, and it needs to go hand in hand with the study. So each of us must be convinced in our own selves that we are doing what Father would have us to do. And Paul said to the Roman assembly of Messianic believers, "One man esteemeth one day above another, another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind." Romans chapter 14, verse 5. So all that Hillary and I have talked about in this installment, do your own research. Do your own searching, your own soul searching to find out where you are in your walk. And then walk out your walk to the best of your ability. You are the one who has to make the decisions on how you're going to walk out this walk. And ultimately, how are you going to guard the month of the Aviv? So it is vital that we establish, that we foster and maintain as deep a relationship with Abba as we can with Father. This is a relationship issue here. The keeping of his feast and the guarding of the month of the Aviv comes down to what level of relationship do you have with Father? And depending upon that level of relationship will translate over to how you guard the month of the Aviv. So seek Father's Holy Spirit to direct our guarding of the month of the Aviv.
The feast is a time of celebration. So when we look towards the feast, we're looking with excitement. We're looking forward to it. And we're looking forward to meeting the people who are sons and daughters of Jehovah. And we're looking forward to making connections. We're looking forward to sharing, to learning, to giving, to receiving, not just from each other, but mostly from Father. Because when he calls us, he doesn't call us just to look at us and to tell us, oh, mingle among yourselves. No, he's calling us because he has something for us. So when we go expecting to receive from him. Whether you're staying at home or you're going on a pilgrimage feast, it doesn't matter where, you're always expecting to receive from him. He says, those who diligently seek him, he will reward. He is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So let us diligently seek him when we come to these feasts and look forward with expectation to receiving from him, so that when you get back and the feast is done, you can say, this is what I learned. I received revelation. I received insight. I received something. But you know he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
So we've given you simply the framework upon which to build your own guarding of the month of the Aviv. It now falls to each of us to add that drywall and the finishing touches to our guarding of the month of the Aviv. Hillary nor I can tell you specifics on how to guard. We can just give you the framework in which to build that. And again, that comes back down to the relationship, the level of relationship you have and the commitment you have to that relationship with Father. So go out and just crush the month of the Aviv, and the use of popular parlance. Just make it happen. Just have a wonderful new year. And in closing, Hillary, do you have anything final to say about it?
I hope one day we can have a New Year celebration just like the Gregorian calendar has. You know, it's a New Year's celebration of the agricultural observational calendar, which is Father's calendar. We need to start celebrating that New Year big.
Indeed.
So the world knows.
World knows.
Because right now it's the biggest secret.
So with that, we will bring this installment of It's Not As You Perceive and Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections to a close. We're at we're a few minutes over the 2-hour time frame, but we hope you were able to stay with us and that you were blessed as much as we were blessed in producing and publishing this installment. So have a blessed and happy New Year, Saint. And take care until next time we post. Take care and be blessed.
Shalom.
Shalom.